Hello, and welcome to the third and final episode of the Edinburgh Poltergeist. I'm Stephen Miller, spooky historian, and this podcast is brought to you by the Poltergeist Project. Like, subscribe, comment, check it out on Facebook for more content on all the series so far. Keighley, London, Sunderland, and now Edinburgh. Right at the end of this episode, I'll be revealing the location for Series 5. It is well hot today. It's been a really sunny day where I am in Yorkshire, England, and my office is up in the loft at home. And yeah, it's really roasting up here this evening. But bear with me, I've got a nice big bottle of water to get me through. So a quick catch up on this series so far. The year is 1875, and we're in a poor area of Edinburgh, a flat in a tenement building on Rose Street. We have Elizabeth Thompson, 86, and her great-granddaughter Georgina McClellan, 12, and they are terrorised by strange goings-on, with a particular focus on Elizabeth. There are multiple witnesses to the phenomena, lots of neighbours and visitors, and we've got domestic items moving all over the house, these mysterious cries of agony in the night, and then water drenching the two principal victims. Over a period of 6 weeks, it actually gets so bad that Elizabeth and Georgina move out. News of the paranormal activity at 153 Rose Street spread around the city, and the local newspaper, The Current, sent a reporter to investigate. He spoke to witnesses, and he tracked down Elizabeth and Georgina in their new home. Elizabeth then blamed the activity on a student of the Wizard of the North, a famous stage magician called John Henry Anderson. I covered this in the last episode. In this episode, I'm going to look at how the case was reported in another rival newspaper, the Northern British Daily Mail. Now, this kind of thing actually happens quite a lot. I've investigated hundreds of poltergeist cases, and rival newspapers often use these stories to kind of have a pop at each other. So it's worth being aware of in your own research because it can add a very strong bias based on, I think, basically who got the story first, who gets the scoop, tends to be the following up newspaper then does a lot of effort debunking. So I'm going to use the Mail's report to also draw some of my own conclusions about what might have been going on in this story. For all that, I ended the last episode mentioning that I'd ordered Georgina's death certificate. Shout out to Scotland's people for the nice, easy ordering process. She was only 27 when she died, and I couldn't find it mentioned in the press anywhere, and I kind of wanted to finish off the story, so it's hopefully not anything too morbid. It could take a little bit of time to get the certificate scanned and printed and posted, but it arrived just yesterday. So I'm going to open it now and see what it says. I've actually not even looked at this before. Like I always say, the podcast is warts and all history, so you're going to get me seeing this document for the first time, so we'll see how that goes. It comes in a nice stiffened A4 envelope with "Do Not Bend" written on it from the National Records of Scotland. So here we go. Let's all open this envelope. So yeah, there's a big cardboard stiffener in the back. Having worked at archives, I'm used to these kind of document folders for sending out items to people requesting. And then the original death certificate in high resolution scanned and then printed on this official watermarked paper as it's an official death certificate. So scanning over it, it's 1890 deaths in the district of St Andrews, Edinburgh. And then we get into the details. So the name and surname, Georgina Marjorie McClellan, a domestic servant and single at the time of death. When and where died. So she died in 1890, August the 20th at 2:20 in the morning. Thankfully, the handwriting is pretty good on this. Sometimes it can be quite sketchy, but it is in cursive, but it's fairly legible. She died at number 3 Jamaica Street, Edinburgh. Well, that's not an address I have seen associated with this case. So let me just have a look where that one is. Hopefully it's still there and is Google mappable. Yep, it is. It is. Oh, actually, it's very close to where she was living on the previous census. So she was living on House Street with the French bootmakers. And now Jamaica Street is just round the corner, kind of a back street running parallel to Heriot Row, just off Queen Street Gardens, I suppose. Looks like in preparation for doing this, I'm looking at it now, I opened up an 1890s OS map, so I'll just find it there as well so I can see what it looks like at the time of Georgina being there. Yeah, so it's a bit different to today. Jamaica Street used to run straight through between Howe and India Street. Today it's broken up and kind of loops round Jamaica Street Lane, north and south. Number 3 looks like it's on the left-hand side of the road if you're going from Howe Street, in between a couple of pubs. Yeah, it's interesting how close it was to where she was a servant before. Has she gone somewhere because she was unwell, or was she living there and then going back to the house for some reason? A slightly curious setup. What else does it tell us? So she was a female. She was 27 years of age. Her father was John McClellan, a draper, deceased. Her mother was Georgina McClellan, née Pitcairn, also deceased. Cause of death. She died of chronic cystitis, as certified by John McGibbon, physician and surgeon. And then the person who registered her death is James McClellan, her brother, and he was present at her death. Now, normally it would give his address, but the fact it doesn't tells me that they were living together. So they were both living at number 3 Jamaica Street, or she'd gone to stay with him perhaps as she was unwell, either or. And then it's the final section is just telling us about it was registered on the 22nd of August, so just a couple of days after she died, and the registrar was William Blair. So that's what we get from an 1890s Scottish death certificate. So it's interesting to see that document. I don't think it offers a particular angle or any insight on our case, to be honest, other than, I suppose, emphasising the fragility and precarious nature of life in the 19th century, especially if you're poor and a woman. I suppose today the thought of dying from such a treatable infection is kind of crazy, really, but modern medical antibiotics are a 20th century invention, so a stubborn infection, could lead to complications. So yeah, it's a sad end for Georgina, really, but it's nice to wrap up that story, know exactly what we're dealing with. I'm going to take some comfort from the fact that she was with her brother and was around the same kind of area that she'd been living in, we know, for at least a decade. So seems to have some stability in her life, at least. So I'm going to take some comfort from that. So what of these warring newspapers? So the Mail's article starts, "The Current has heard of a ghost in Edinburgh and has been hunting the supernatural visitant by means of a special commissioner, in quotation marks. But very naturally, or perhaps in a case of this kind we should say supernaturally, the ghost declined to appear. The terror of being interviewed and interviewed too by a special commissioner from the leading Conservative organ in Scotland seems to have proved too much for its nerves, and it vanished in thin air." Now, I was adding some emphasis into that, but I think it was very much written with that kind of tone. It's very much taking the mick and suggesting, this idea of having a special commissioner and, yeah, the supernaturally little one-liner there. So you can very much see the tone they're taking. Also, there's a hint at the political rivalry between the two papers as well. The report then goes on to basically, I suppose, try and debunk the case. It picks up on various elements of the paranormal phenomena and offers non-paranormal explanations for them. So I'm going to go through them one by one, and as I go, give my kind of thoughts as well. First, they discuss the episode where Elizabeth's bed shakes and then collapses. They write, "Bottled spirits might have produced the phenomenon in question." So yeah, again, having a little pun on the ghost spirit word there. But they did totally ignore one of the things reported in this incident, which is that the pillows, Elizabeth's pillows, were repeatedly kind of whipped out from underneath her and flung across the room. The initial report mentions that Georgina, her great-granddaughter, attempted to tie the pillows down with string, but they were still thrown across the room. Now, to be honest, at the time when I first read this string thing and tying the pillows down did make me a bit suspicious. I kind of wondered, what if the string wasn't being used to secure them and was actually the method by which someone was pulling them out? But perhaps they were caught and they said, oh, no, I was trying to tie them down. I don't know. Who knows? But for whatever reason, the mail just don't mention that element of this phenomena. The next one is the water soaking Elizabeth and Georgina. Again, they say, truly a most vexatious and tricksy spirit. But if it poured the water down, it must certainly have gone upstairs too. There's something droll in the idea of a ghost traipsing upstairs and downstairs in my lady's chamber with a ewer full of water. Probably it is a sanitary spirit and desirous of impressing on the old woman in a practical way the virtue of cleanliness. Again, this seems like a very weak, sceptical view, to be honest. And the comments about cleanliness is like pure kind of middle-class snobbery, to be honest. I'd actually thought, maybe dodgy plumbing would be a more obvious explanation for this, but then I thought the fact it isn't mentioned at all, probably there wasn't any internal plumbing in the building. Thinking about it now, we know it was an old building. Even by 1875, it was nearly 100 years old. So yeah, I don't think they're having fun with this idea of a ghost going upstairs and pouring water down, but it's a very literal understanding of how something like this might happen in a paranormal sense. The next incident it picks up on is Elizabeth's woolen cap, the incident where it gets repeatedly thrown from her head. She goes, picks it and puts it back on again, and it gets whisked off again. And for this one, the Mail's report outright just blames Georgina. She says that it could have been anything. Why not a mischievous granddaughter? Obviously, we know she's not a granddaughter, but I'll give him that one. Obviously, I have wondered about Georgina and her possible role in this phenomena. But the cap incident was witnessed by others. Surely they'd have seen if Georgina was just grabbing it off her great-grandma's head and throwing it across the room and picking it up and then putting it back again. Doesn't seem possible in that sense. So whilst I have been suspicious of Georgina, this particular incident didn't strike me as one that I have any great concerns that it would have been her able to do it unless she's got some really good tricky system going on with strings and wires and things, which seems a bit elaborate. The next one we've got, it's the story when Elizabeth's neighbour goes to stay with her for a night to reassure her, but on waking they find that the room has been totally trashed. And again, the explanation the newspaper offers is that perhaps the room was already a mess when they went to bed, and they just didn't notice it because it was dark. Again, it's a weak effort for me in terms of debunking the case. And if anything, actually, it probably goes the other way and strengthens a paranormal explanation. Clearly, they felt someone couldn't have gone in and done it whilst they slept, which was my initial thought. They must have thought that was not feasible. Then finally, they talk about this one about the boots moving backwards and forwards in front of this Christian missionary who frequently visited their home. Again, the sceptical explanation for this is probably the worst of the lot. We should feel our hair rise at this, were it not that from anything which appears in the evidence there may well have been a foot in the boot, which would render its locomotive propensities less extraordinary. Now surely, if someone was just wearing the boots and walking around, that would have been pretty apparent and wouldn't have been reported as a strange incident. It seems a very weak explanation there. I actually never thought in doing these historical cases I'd be going through contemporary skeptical explanations and debunking the debunkers, but the way this one's gone, I don't think they stand up at all in terms of what was reported. As I mentioned with the water one, they perhaps serve to strengthen the paranormal explanation in this case. If that's the best a contemporary critic could offer, then what can I add 150 years later? The only one that I would be drawn to as a sceptical explanation is the idea that Georgina was involved. We saw in episode 2 that she'd had obviously a difficult start to life and a strange situation living with her great-grandma when the rest of her family were living together. Don't really obviously know the full story to that. To be honest, her life didn't get a whole lot better, did it? I mean, we've actually had a death certificate here today. But there's no evidence that she was behind it, so it is pure speculation. I think the fact that the incidents don't continue when they move out would probably suggest it wasn't Georgina. Or who knows. As I mentioned, Elizabeth herself blamed a student of the Wizard of the North when she realised the Wizard of the North was dead. Rather than a ghost or a poltergeist, she didn't believe it was anything spiritual. Some of the other witnesses mentioned the idea of someone playing tricks on Elizabeth, so perhaps that's another skeptical explanation that there was a real human person behind all this. Maybe, I don't know, they were trying to get her out of the building, but there's really nothing to suggest who or why. So again, it is pure speculation at this point. Now for me, what happened at 153 Rose Street for 6 weeks in 1875 will remain a mystery. What do you think? Get in touch on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or you can email me at the Poltergeist Project Podcast at gmail.com. So, what next for the Poltergeist Project? Well, I can reveal that we'll be heading back to West Yorkshire for an absolutely fascinating story I've uncovered about a haunted house. Or could it be a haunted village? Goodbye for now. Be sure to join me next time for episode 1 of the Wyke Poltergeist.